reports suggest that the percentage of university students from rural youth in higher education is smaller than proportion of that who should qualify for higher education. And that is also aligned with the trend that on average students from cities have higher median income and receive higher scores in UNT. Thus, they are in better position to qualify for state grants and enter higher education. So what about other groups that might be marginalized? So we have students who are the only child in a single parent household. The survey found that those students were very much underrepresented as compared to how many students should qualify or graduate from general education. Ethnic Russians and students from other ethnic minorities are less represented. Again, Russia attracts a lot of students from Kazakhstan, so that could be one of the explanations. Gender-wise, Kazakhstan demonstrates parity and even what we call reverse gender gap. There are more women than men in higher education. Now, what else in terms of the money for universities? There are differences in funding between the national universities, Nazarbayev University, and state universities. So these universities receive different amounts of money per student, and it has been an issue for universities to bring in enough tuition-paying students because the state grant wouldn't cover unit costs. And at the same time, there is an issue of ability to pay for the population because there is no feasible student loan system in Kazakhstan that would enable students to borrow and pay for higher education. It's just not very good for the student. They keep working on it. Hopefully there will be change, but so far, universities have addressed this issue by not increasing their tuition. What it leads to is because the state grant now is higher than tuition that universities charge, there are concerns about cross-subsidization of tuition-funded students from the state grants. Why is that an issue? The issue is because state grant already does not cover the unit costs. So the universities have to shift the funds around, and now with the lower tuition than the unit cost. So the concern is that the improvement in quality of education in universities may not be as speedy as it's hoped for. Now, what does the government has planned for the future, for the next medium term of policy planning? So, first of all, policymakers in Kazakhstan acknowledge that there are issues with equity in higher education access, and the plans are to introduce a need-based component in distributing student grants, in addition to merit-based component. There is also a plan to bring in more money from not just from the government, but from businesses and also local governments who have their own budget. But again, it's not clear in what proportions and how it will work exactly. So again, like speakers were saying yesterday, there are a lot of unknowns because of COVID, but there are also a lot of unknowns because of regular, very incremental policy planning process. So the vision is there. The question is about the mechanism. And one of the mechanisms that's being planned to introduce is to develop this voucher type of approach in higher education funding even further, and to allow students even more flexibility in bringing money to different universities. The public money would cover part of the cost, but then what's on the top of that would need to be covered from the private sources. Again, we don't know from where, whether it's student loans or savings, but that's the vision. And what has COVID changed in all this direction? Well, some things it has changed, some things it has not really. The fundamental issues remain. What COVID-19 has certainly done for achieving the target 4.3 to increase accessibility and affordability of higher education, it has exacerbated the digital divide and dividing resources between those who have access to resources and those who have not. And so the necessity of need-based approach in distributing public funds to support students who are in more disadvantaged situations is even stronger than before. COVID-19 has not diminished the government's commitment to give more funds to higher education. The question, however, is whether it realistically will be possible given the overall economy slowdown. And we also don't know how much money will be there available from these other sources to fund higher education. But the most pressing question probably here in this context is how will universities prioritize spending their limited resources? What will be the goal? And here I would like to bring to your attention a recent result from a study of adult skills, conducted in the scope of OECD project. And unfortunately, this result shows that despite higher rates of completion of tertiary education in Kazakhstan, people who are 25 to 34-year-old perform at the same level as 55 to 65-year-olds, and they are far below the average score of OECD countries. So what does it mean? It means that the current recent higher education graduates in Kazakhstan, on average, have not benefited greatly from comparative education, from higher education in contemporary era, as compared to their older counterparts who graduated from the kind of previous system of higher education. So this really indicates that there are serious concerns or the need to understand how higher education content, approach, etc., needs to be reshaped in order to maximize the outcomes of higher education for individuals as well as for public. And this is the question that was there before COVID-19 hit, but now with COVID-19 and resources further shrinking, this question, I mean, you cannot postpone it, basically, and that's the challenge. So thank you very much. I will stop here, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rita Kasa. Professor Rita Kasa was from Graduate School of Education. And now we will take question and answer at the end for all speakers. So now we will go to Dr. Just Borman from Institute of Water Policy, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, all the way from Singapore. The floor is to you, Dr. Just.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear and see me?
Yes, yes.
About 2 seconds before you announced me, I came back in again.
Oh.
Okay, I need to share my screen for the presentation. Oh dear. Can anyone else show my presentation? Because it was not uploaded in this session, but only in the other session. Oops. Okay, so that is not going to work. Sorry, I have some problem in sharing my screen.
It's okay. If you can quickly email me, I can share.
Okay.
It's iftikhar.load, IFTIKHAR. I am writing in the chat my address.
Yeah. Okay, I did email it.
Okay, good. So here is your presentation. And,
okay, I think the sharing works now, suddenly.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, then I can start. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Joost Buurman. I'm Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Water Policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. I will give my presentation about water security of cities. I think it aligns nicely with the first presentation. I based this research on something I've done a year ago with some collaborators at University of Twente in the Netherlands, but I added some extra information on Central Asia. So, okay, I have to share it in this way. I can't share it with my full screen, sorry for that. Yeah, so we all know that there are many urban water challenges. Rapid urbanization causes increase of impervious areas. Rain has to go somewhere. There's disturbance of natural drainage patterns. You have pollutants coming from the streets and from industry and other sources. Rapid urbanization also, very importantly, causes increase of water demand. And on top of that, you also have climate change with all the major impacts on the water systems. That, of course, creates very large challenges in urban areas to supply water. Excuse me. Still goes not that smooth. Okay. Besides that, there are also many urban regional water interactions. Cities concentrate water demand. There are many people and economic activities that depend on water that is usually not locally available. There is a study of McDonald's that was done a few years ago that estimated that cities get their water on average about 30 to 50 kilometers away from the city. You can see that in the graph on this slide. That means that cities, they do impact on water resources in the region where they're located. Of course, there's also lots of discharges from cities causing sewage and polluted rivers. And famous or infamous example is the pollution of the Ganges River. And although agriculture normally uses a lot more water, there can exist cases where there's competition between urban water use and agricultural water use. For instance, a few years ago, there was a drought in Cape Town in South Africa and in Sao Paulo, where water had to be reallocated from agriculture to cities. Now, how can you address those urban water challenges? And there are several frameworks that have been developed to assess urban water challenges and also water challenges in general. And I think the most commonly used is integrated water resources management or urban water resources management, specifically for urban areas. And that promotes a kind of integrated development of water resources and water management. And that really focuses on the process, on getting things done, how it's organized, etc. Water security is really focusing on goals, and that's why it kind of also nicely aligns with SDGs, which are also goals. But it's very broadly defined water security. It can be focusing on quantities of water, acceptable quality of water, sustaining livelihoods, human well-being, socioeconomic development, preserving ecosystems, all kinds of things. So basically, everything that is too dirty, too much, and too little water. In order to assess urban water challenges, it's very complex. The urban water governance and management, it links to lots of different areas, land use planning, and so it's not only water, but it's also environment. It's many other things as people's livelihoods. So it's very complex to manage. And by means of quantification of these goals, it can be useful in the policy and management process. Therefore, we kind of developed the Urban Water Security Dashboard. The Urban Water Security Dashboard is a kind of system or a method that is based on the pressure state impact response framework, which is probably for people working in environmental topics quite familiar. it's a method to analyze dynamic systems, and urban water systems are very dynamic. We identified 54 indicators through a literature review. And these indicators, they can be aggregated at different levels. It can be aggregated at the level of the city. So you have kind of one indicator for a city, one outcome for a city. You can aggregate it at the pressure, state, impact, and response level, or you can break it down at even lower levels. The pressures are specifically kind of environmental and socioeconomic. For that, we had 15 indicators. Then you have the state of the water system, for which focuses on the available water quality, the quantity, and the infrastructure, which is 15 indicators. The impacts are the functions of the water, for which we have 10 indicators. And finally, the institutions, planning and operations, we have 14 indicators. For all these indicators, we collected data from academic publications and reports and internet sources, except for the responses, because that is a bit more hard to find data on it. And for that, we conducted a survey. So I don't have time to go through each individual indicator, but this is just a kind of brief example. So for instance, for the environmental pressures, you can look at the variation in annual rainfall. You can look at freshwater scarcity around the city. And then for each of these indicators, we have developed a method how you can collect the data through search cascades based on specific studies. And this is all laid down in a kind of very large document that very detailed, very clearly lays down how you come to score an indicator, and you can give it a score between 1 and 5. From 1 is poor and 5 is good. And this detailed guide also helps if different people collect data for different cities to come to kind of a more or less consistent answer for all the cities. So then some of the results. Yeah, this is the ranking we did for 12 cities. Actually, the original study was 10 cities, but I added Sultan and Almaty, for which I tried to collect the data. Was a bit challenging because for some of the indicators, it was quite hard to find data. Fortunately, I also got some help from Alia and Aziza, who helped me with the survey. You can see in this ranking, of course, it's always interesting to see rankings. Okay, which city is doing best and which city is the worst? And oh, I'm from Amsterdam, so I'm on top. But more interesting is to see how the different cities come to the different rankings and scores. One thing you can phrase to see that pressure is something that is very hard to influence for policymakers. You have environmental pressures. It's just the climate, for instance, climate change. The growth of the city, the state of the economy, that is something that urban water managers cannot do much about. That's just a given for them. But even if the pressure is ranked not very well, for instance, if you look at Dubai, where it's 40, it's still possible to obtain a high ranking. And what is very important in this is the response, because through the response of policymakers and of water system operators, you can improve the state and the impact, and that will lead to a higher water security. Interestingly, this was also mentioned by Professor Vino Thomas yesterday in his keynote, that the response is the most important to improve situation, to improve indicators, and to move towards the SDGs. Also, what is interesting with this type of indicators is that many water scarcity indicators, they basically only look at the pressure side, how much water is there available per person, for instance. But that is, of course, not enough. You should also definitely look at the other parts of the equation. How is your water system, and what for impact does it have on the different people? these are the scores of our dashboard for Nur Sultan and Almaty. Unfortunately, they are not entirely green. That is when you get the best score. Red is the worst score. But there are quite a few indicators where they score quite well. What I mentioned, it was sometimes a bit hard to find data, so I had to make some guesstimates, and maybe in the future I can improve on this. What you can also see is that Nur Sultan and Almaty, they are very similar, which is kind of as expected because they are located in the same country and in similar climate zones. One thing is also they are inland cities, and our water security also considers coastal threats of flooding and sea level rise. But that is for inland cities not very relevant. So you can see in the pressure quite some green in the second column, which is mostly related to the coastal pressures that are not there. In general, the water pressure in the pressures on water security in Nur Sultan and Almaty, they are not too bad. One thing is that the cities are growing very fast, which creates pressure. But generally, it's kind of quite okay. For the state, the situation is a bit mixed. It's a mixed picture. Some good things, some bad things. When you look at water supply infrastructure, flood protection, there are some good scores, some average scores, and some worse scores. But there's clear insecurity in the functions of the water system. When you look at water supply and sanitation issues, not all people are connected to the urban water supply systems. There are some issues with flooding due to heavy rains, and not all people have adequate sanitation. So that is definitely some issues where there is still quite a bit of work. If you look at the institutional framework and planning and operational management in the response, the score is actually quite bad. Even if you go back to the previous slide, if you compare it to the other cities, Nur Sultan and Almaty score very bad there. Which is a bit, at least for me, surprising. But I'm not very familiar with Central Asia, I have to say. But we did this for 10 other cities, and we gave basically everyone the same questionnaire. And only for Nur Sultan and Almaty, the only difference is that it was translated into Russian. But also. For Almaty, the response, I only had 1 or 2 responses, while for Nur Sultan I had 5 responses, which is quite close to the average for all the other cities, but they score similar anyway. But probably this is an interesting topic for discussion later. Why is the scoring? Is it really so bad? Is the institutional framework poor in planning and operational management, or is it more a perception issue? If we go back to the results of all the cities, you can kind of identify 6 different city stories, as we called it. That is that in some cities the indicators follow roughly the same pattern, and their system dynamics is comparable. And we can see that there are water abundant and wealthy cities, the top scoring cities, Amsterdam and Toronto, where they score well in most dimensions. It's the top left scorecard, and there are some pressures, but basically everything is handled well, and they have sufficient financial resources to address issues. The second type of cities are the water abundant and wealthy but subtropical cities, and they are dependent, Singapore and Hong Kong specifically. They face more pressures due to climate, and also because they are dependent on other territories for their water supply. Singapore is dependent on Malaysia for a large part of its water supply. Hong Kong is dependent on mainland China for its water supply. These dependencies can create tensions at some times. You have wealthy and desert cities like Dubai. They face severe pressures due to the desert climate, but they have sufficient resources to address these through technological means. You have the megacities in emerging countries, Sao Paulo and Beijing. They face many challenges. They face socioeconomic pressures. Their budget is also limited because a lot of different areas need to be addressed. So there the picture already gets a bit more mixed. And finally, you have the developing cities, where actually all signs when it comes to water security are red. They have pressures. They have insufficient resources to address these, and that causes, in very much cases, big water insecurity for the people who live there. Sultan and Almaty, I tried to fit them in one of the other existing categories, but it didn't really fit. They seem to be a kind of category by themselves. They probably are most similar to Beijing, which is also a kind of inland city, and where you have a kind of mixed picture. But it's again the response that is a bit the odd one out. Okay, going back to the link between cities and the regions then. So the urban water security and regional water security, they're closely linked, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, which is reflected.
We need to wrap it up, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it is reflected in several indicators. Solving problems in urban water quality very often requires the region. This type of issue is, I think, an interesting issue for further research, because the water security situation in Kazakhstan is as a country is quite different from how it is in the cities, because it depends on river flows, etc. So this is probably an area where we can do some more research. Okay, finally, my conclusion is that water security has many different dimensions, and I think the water security dashboard that helps it to address it in a holistic way. The urban water security is driven by appropriate responses to kind of inevitable environmental and socioeconomic pressures. And if these responses are adequate, then the system's functions can be adequately fulfilled, and then you can achieve higher levels of water security. Okay, that was my presentation. I just want to put in some acknowledgements, because I didn't do it by myself, but I did it together with a team. And also thanks to Stefanos and Alia and Aziza for helping me with the expert questionnaire. Okay, thank you.
Moment. Very well presented. And our next speaker is Dr. Alia Tankibayeva from KMAP University, Almaty. Dr. Alia Tankibayeva, are you here? Yes, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, thank you very much. And I will now going to
Okay, I think we have lost our speaker. Dr. Rita, can you hear me? Okay, let's invite our next speaker. Alia Khan is here. Alia Khan, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
I think we would start with you. Okay, Dr. Alia Tankibayova is back. Dr. Alia Tankibayova, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
How can I share my presentation when I...
There is a third button at the bottom of your screen and you have disappeared again. Okay, I think maybe in Almaty we are having some connection problems. Okay, Miss Alia Rebecca Khan, are you ready? Yes, I think you should go ahead first and we will see how Dr. Alia's connection works. Lost Generation, a comparative study of the efficiency of emergency education centers. So we are back to education.
This side just the other line.
Excuse me, Alia, we can't hear you properly. Is it on my side or Dr. Rita, if you can just, is it the same problem at your side?
Yes, yes, the voice breaks.
Can you?
No, your voice is breaking up.
But not the sound.
Oh no.
No, it does not seem to be working.
Oh, it's not.
Okay. Probably you should try to. If you could please try to switch off and on your microphone. Now you need to switch it on again. Alia, are you there?
Yes, dear all, I'm here. When I try to share my slides, it just keeps throwing me out. If you, as moderator, or maybe Madina as administrator, can share my slides, I will try to deliver eventually the presentation. Thank you very much.
Sure, not a problem. And we are also looking for Alia Rebecca Khan. Alia Rebecca Khan, can you hear me? Does not seem like. Okay, in the meanwhile, if I may request from audience, you can type your question and answers from in the Q&A session.
Yeah.
We had a present.
Dear Madina, thank you very much. I think I will start until my system working and everything is fine. So my name is Alia Tankibayeva. I'm full-time faculty at Kimop University with the program of Public Administration, Public Policy, International Development. So basically today I would like to present, and this is just a starting project. We just started a work in progress. It's very much open for suggestions, and I was very surprised and I was very happy to hear presentation of Dr. Just and how much many things resonate with the financing and governing and management of water infrastructure. In our case, we look particularly in the water infrastructure in agricultural sector for irrigation purposes. But I see that with the adoption of the Sustainable Development Agenda, with the SDG 17 goals, really the trajectories are running or going, and the approach and thinking about what should be and what is sustainable development of infrastructure, what infrastructure is quite resonate. I don't really see my slides, but I will try to continue. So indeed, agriculture so far worldwide constitute the major consumer of water. However, in Central Asia, but also generally in the world, there is really gap in infrastructure financing for irrigation. There are inefficiencies in our region. The losses from channels constitute up to 30%, and in February 2019, the government of Kazakhstan declared approval of a new water infrastructure development strategy, and it requires really there will be massive investment, but there are also more investment needed. About 4 water reservoirs will be reconstructed, 7,000 kilometers of channels. 80,000 jobs will be created. Of them, 70,000 jobs will be permanent. So in water infrastructure, irrigation will continue to play an important role in agricultural sector development. Yes, next slide. Thank you. So research questions are very general because this is really a scoping at this moment. This is really a scoping study, and we just try to understand what's going on in the field, and how the Sustainable Development Agenda has maybe repositioned or set the new objectives for the policy. Irrigation itself, it's not really a policy or a certain independent sector, but it is an important contributor to agricultural, food security, regional development, and other policy objectives. That's why, of course, a more detailed look into the irrigation infrastructure is needed. Martin, thank you. Next. Yes, we tried to look into the project in their development. So whatever projects are known now and kind of considered as the good cases, but also on the opposite, we looked at their current stage of development and then traced back of how they initiated, developed, and at each stage is what kind of financial models and what kind of where did investment come from, who were those, how the risk were shared, as well as benefits. So next slide. Little bit more about our analytical framework, and also some kind of preliminary findings or results are here. I will not tell the like everything what was found because the field is really complex, very populated projects, difficult to have classified or standardized really taxonomy on them. However, in the first round, we looked into the scales of the agricultural project, like small scale, medium, large scale, or mega scale. And it is important to understand that it's not only about the amount of investments, what the different or amount of the land use or output, but also input as water, which are differentiate between small scale, medium, and large. But this is also different models of how they contribute to the, for example, food security, to the regional development, to sustainability of the economies and regions overall. And then in the second round, we looked into the already I cannot show you, but into the economic models from the policy perspective, how really financial arrangements are carried out. And in the first category, user funded, but this is not the type of the utility because more kind of utility is now these days sought with the spread of public-private partnership. But user funded, these are those communal type of the arrangements when really kind of participative and really kind of self-organized. They are rare these days, but with the rise and with the interest to more indigenous agriculture models and nature-based solutions, which are kind of enriching to the environment. And in that way, they're different from traditional agricultural models. This communal type of the arrangement might be having their kind of new look or new revival. Then public subsidies continue to be common, and the shift, or at least the desire, is that public funds are a little bit like less, the burden is released, and the agricultural and irrigation investments are more attractive, and private sector will be able to contribute more. Water trading is a rare arrangement, but it exists, and it resolves some of the agriculture and irrigation issues. And here we looked really into the real trade that farmers carry out in terms of quantities of water. There are associated water financial markets and some instruments which are available, but this is also of interest. So this is kind of a scope of what's going on. And on the next slide, Madin, and on the next slide. Yes, so there are some trajectories for future research, and the gaps that we identified in terms of the scientific knowledge, like the in the economic, in the policy literature, something which remains kind of a white spot. But our analysis of the project documentation and also of the real developments indeed shows that this is something which in the ground or in the field is happening, and happening, and we have to consider that. And this is again with used presentation. The important thing is that in evaluation of the irrigation models, cost and benefits, traditional, that's fine, they hold true. However, better conceptualization of what is benefit really is critical for the success. And when participants of the project themselves were able to conceptualize the project work, because water income, it cannot be traced directly. This is not like farmers are using water, they're not selling waters, but they receive certain type of the benefits from this water usage, and this is still kind of poorly conceptualized in the policy, well, let's say knowledge, but it happens, and when the participants are able to really negotiate and conceptualize about that, it is a critical kind of success factor. And in the previous slide, I forgot to say that it's really an agricultural sector happens that wherever and what kind of funds are available, this is what has a decisive role of what type of the economic model and what kind of irrigation would be launched. It's not necessarily the best choice in terms of value delivery or kind of profit maximization, or generally not best choice, but where the funds are available, this is kind of the decisive factor. Next. Next. Yeah, and that was the model from the farm level, and Ward, he kind of quite a recognized model in irrigation evaluation, system evaluation, and that is one from the perspective of the national account. And apparently, as you can see, what is missing, this is the model, they appear now, we have them, but it's really what needs further exploration from the investor perspective. And same questions and even more are actually actually happening there is that most of the traditional evaluation models, they are really from the national account perspective, but now we really have to, and we see that successful projects, they are user focused, or they have very clear understanding of who are users, who are stakeholders, how they derive the benefits, how they behave in relation to water, what might be their interest. Agricultural projects, irrigation especially, are very problematic in terms of commercializing. They deliver still a mixture of public and private benefits, and to make them really workable and attractive for the investors, maybe simply kind of a traditional evaluation in terms of cost and benefits from well, let's say consumption and also investment of water to infrastructure, it does not work. But user focused perspective, this is something which we found successful in the projects that are currently implemented and implemented well. Where it is like it, then it is problematic. The second one, which should be really accounted, because now with the sustainable agenda we have 3 pillars and even more, because there are also kind of complex integration of social, environmental, and economic objectives, like in those nature-based solutions. They do need their own kind of investment as well, and they should be accounted into the evaluation of the irrigation systems and models. And it similar applies to the coordination and alignment cost or consideration, but also the benefit that comes from this conceptualizing and understanding how these things work together in terms of coordinating the scale. This again, we see in the project that delays, cost overruns, sometimes a stop of financing or lack of financing, kind of consistency over time. This happens when the project ownership is not aligned across the level of scales, like pharma, part of the basin, watershed, and everything, but also the governance between them, who are bearing those risks. So when the levels of the government cannot agree about that, then there is kind of has the negative effect on the project success. And the last, so basically there are way more findings and way more solutions, but can we move to the next slide? Yes, and the last one, like really what I would maybe want to say is that this is what we found on the ground level. It happens even when the regulation, for example, does not allow water trade, but farmers do invent different field level solutions, and they behave on their own things. And the interesting thing that the water pricing is really kind of does not really follow traditional supply and demand logic, because when water prices are high, so farmers adjust. When water prices are low, they again adjust, and it is really negotiating and building a kind of, you know, the social contract or the social system with the farmers and other stakeholders. This is what works. And what traditional was considered, and this is the maybe the perils or really the achievement of sustainable development agenda, that what traditionally in economics was considered as positive spillovers or positive externalities now actually are decisive factors. I don't know about the other sectors, but in agriculture it looks like that these are not externalities, these are the decisive factors which define the project success or failure. Thank you so much. With that, I'm ending, and I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Due to some technical issues, we are running out of late. We have questions, and if speakers can quickly and briefly answer these questions. The first question is to Professor Rita Kasa. Thank you for your presentation. I was interested in what you said about the performance of recent Kazakhstani graduates comparing to older generations, how this performance is measured. Does it mean salary level or other factors? I think you understood the question. If I may elaborate, I think Danatio is trying to ask what's the main difference between now graduating students?
Well, this
thank you
study,
for your presentation. I was interested in what you said about the performance of recent Kazakhstani graduates comparing to older generations. How this performance is measured?
right?
Does it mean salary level or other factors? I think
I understood your question.
I think Danatio is trying to ask what's the main difference between the
Okay. So I will respond to this question. Thank you very much. This data comes from a recent. It was finished last year, a PIAC study, which is run. It's a big comparative OECD project, and it measures skills of adult population. And the measurement of the skills methodology is available online. If you write in Google PIAC, there are many details, but the principle is that this data is collected from some representative sample of adults. So people who collected the data actually went to each individual and with laptops and tablets, and then these individuals, respondents, were providing data in the way of answering different questions. So the OECD methodology for this study is freely available online, and if you are interested in details, perhaps I would suggest to look there. But the instruments are validated. This study has been running for already several rounds in different countries. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. The second question is from Dr. Brauman. Professor Stefanos is asking, how do you count the overall scoring from the PSIR components? Is that a mean, or do you add some weighting coefficient? And please explain to ignorant people like me what is PSIR, please. Thank you. Maybe you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, so the PSIR is the pressure state impact response framework that we used. And so you have 4 different components with a different number of indicators under it. So if you want to add them, if you have more indicators, you get a higher score, and you want to avoid that. So to avoid that, we first normalize all the scores within the P, the S, the I, and the R score. So you do you divide by the maximum possible score. And then we just take the arithmetic mean of the different scores to come to a final score. So we don't do any weighting because basically it's very complex to do weighting, because you need to decide what is more important than other things. And for everyone, other factors are more important. For some people, water supply is more important. For some people, sanitation is more important. So it's not really possible to get a kind of conclusive answer to that. So it's just basically normalization and then the mean.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brauman, Dr. Rita Casa, and my apologies to those presentations and some technological glitches, but that happens. That's the new normal. I believe you all have enough patience by now. So, yeah, that's how our life going to be for next few months. I am not sure. Let's see. Thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy your lunch, and we will see you all at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you for leading the session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.